It was supposed to be a celebration, balloons, birthday cake, and laughter. But in just a few minutes, a 6-year-old girl vanished into thin air. No scream, no struggle, no trace. One second she was playing hide and seek, the next she was gone. What followed was one of the most baffling child disappearances in American history, not because no one looked, but because so many people did, and still found nothing. For 37 years, the town of Thorntown lived with a ghost. A name whispered, a face frozen in time, until a forgotten piece of concrete, quietly poured behind an old shed, reopened the case in the most disturbing way. This is not just a story of a missing child, it's a story of secrets buried deep, and the terrifying possibility that the truth was never far away. The girl who vanished at her own birthday party, still no answers. It was a quiet Saturday in October 1986, the kind of day that starts with laughter and ends with cake. A birthday party for a little girl named Shannon Sherrill had begun like any other, but by nightfall, that same birthday became the starting point of a mystery that would haunt an entire town. 6-year-old Shannon was playing hide and seek with neighborhood children outside her home in Thorntown, Indiana. Her mother, Marion, had stepped just inside the house for a moment. When she returned minutes later, Shannon was gone. Not screaming, not crying, just gone. Police were called, neighbors ran out into the streets, and before long, every inch of the surrounding area was being scoured. Helicopters flew overhead, bloodhounds sniffed the grass and fields, volunteers searched through cornfields, barns, even storm drains. But Shannon had vanished without a trace. The strange part? There were children all around. It was a birthday party. People were everywhere. But not a single child remembered seeing Shannon leave. Not one scream was heard. It was as though she had simply evaporated into thin air. Marion told police her daughter wouldn't have wandered far. Shannon was known to be shy and very attached to her mother. In her young life, she had never strayed more than a few houses away. Soon, rumors started swirling. Some believed a stranger had driven through town, snatched Shannon, and fled without being noticed. Others whispered about someone closer to home, maybe a neighbor or even a family member. But there was no evidence, no witness, no sound. Authorities launched a massive search. They combed woods, streams, construction sites, and abandoned wells. Thorntown was a small town, and in places like that, everyone knows everyone. The fear was immediate and personal. Days turned into weeks, then months. Shannon's picture was plastered on telephone poles, milk cartons, and flyers mailed across the Midwest. Her case aired on news segments. Psychics even offered help, but the truth remained stubbornly silent. The Sherrill family refused to move. They kept Shannon's bedroom just as it was, a shrine to a little girl who had loved cartoons and peanut butter sandwiches. Every year on Shannon's birthday, Marion lit a candle and left it on the porch. And every year, no one came home. 7 years after Shannon vanished, a neighbor came forward with something shocking. He claimed to have seen a car idling on the street that day, one he didn't recognize. He described a man inside watching the children, but he hadn't said anything before. Why? Because the man in the car was someone he knew, and he was scared. After years of silence, a neighbor's delayed testimony introduced a potential suspect, someone local, but police never confirmed who that person was. No arrest was made, and the trail went cold. The Sherrill family continued to live with a hole in their hearts. Then, in 2003, 17 years after the disappearance, the phone rang. A woman from Texas contacted law enforcement claiming something shocking. "I think I might be Shannon Sherrill." Her name was Jenny. She'd been adopted at a young age, raised by people she had long suspected weren't her real parents. She had been digging through old records, even talking to a private investigator. And that's when she found Shannon's missing child poster. The resemblance was uncanny. Her age matched. Her baby photos had similar features. She even recalled dreams and flashbacks of a little girl hiding in the dark. She was convinced she was Shannon. Marion Sherrill was contacted. It had been nearly 2 decades. Was this her daughter? Media swarmed the story. Headlines ran wild. Missing girl found after 17 years? But Marion remained cautious. She had been through heartbreak before. Jenny traveled to Indiana. She met investigators. She even agreed to a DNA test. The entire country held its breath. Marion stood silently at the edge of the investigation. She watched this grown woman, trying to imagine if she had Shannon's smile, her eyes, her laugh. The DNA test was processed. A lab in Indianapolis handled the match. Technicians were under pressure. The media wanted an answer. The family wanted closure. And finally, the results came in. She wasn't Shannon. Not even close. Jenny cried. Marion cried. The hope that had been flickering like a dying candle went out. The emotional damage of that false hope ran deep. Jenny disappeared from the public eye, and Marion stopped talking to the media entirely. But as the media attention faded, someone else came forward. A retired cop. He said he remembered something from the early days of the case, something that had been dismissed. He said the original police report had a name crossed out, a suspect who had been quietly removed from the investigation. The reason? That person was related to someone on the inside. When that retired officer spoke to a local journalist, he admitted something troubling. Decades ago, he said, a name was intentionally crossed out of the early case files. A potential suspect who had lived just blocks from Shannon's home, removed before questioning ever began. That man's name was Craig M. Delaney. Craig wasn't a complete stranger. In fact, he was a distant cousin of a police officer who had worked the case in its earliest days. At the time, no one seemed to find his background unusual. He lived quietly in a small rental home just 2 streets over from the Sherrill family. People described him as quiet, a loner. He had no wife, no children, and kept mostly to himself. But something about Craig had always seemed off. One neighbor, who lived 3 doors down, recalled an incident just days before Shannon vanished. She said Craig had stopped by her yard uninvited and asked strange questions about her grandchildren. He was friendly, but odd. Too interested in things he shouldn't be, she said. After Shannon's disappearance, Craig was seen less frequently. His house remained dark for days at a time. Then, a week after the incident, he was gone. Neighbors assumed he had simply moved. Police claimed he was never officially questioned. Years later, his name would surface again, not in Indiana, but in Ohio. In 1992, Craig Delaney had been investigated in a suspected child luring case outside Cleveland. The police report described a blue pickup truck, a man matching Craig's description, and a girl who managed to escape. The case never made it to court. Charges were dropped due to lack of evidence and the family's decision not to proceed. But the similarities were chilling. Thorntown detectives reopened the file quietly in 2003. But by then, Craig was already dead. He had died of a heroin overdose in 2001, alone in a motel in Springfield, Illinois. His belongings were minimal: a few articles of clothing, 2 empty pill bottles, and an envelope full of old family photographs. There was no note. Among those photos was a picture of a child, a little girl with dark hair, sitting in a red wagon. The image was dated 1986, but there was no name written on the back. When Shannon Sherrill was shown the photograph, she broke down in tears. It looked just like Shannon, but I can't say for sure. It's been too long. The image was never conclusively verified. The forgotten lead. According to the logs, the shed sat on private land that was deemed inaccessible at the time. A local official had marked it as peripheral and unlikely. But it wasn't peripheral. In fact, the shed sat just 282 feet from where Shannon was last seen. The documentarian's discovery. In 2011, documentary filmmaker Derek Malloy began investigating cold cases for a series called Gone Without a Trace. Shannon's story stood out. Malloy dug into the old records and began mapping the search grid used in 1986. That's when he noticed the blind spot, a 200-foot wooded patch behind the now collapsed shed. Somehow, that area had been marked as searched, though no report or volunteer log ever confirmed it. Worse, the property had been sold and developed in the early 2000s. A garage and paved driveway now covered what was once open dirt. Malloy approached the new owners. With permission, he brought in a forensic team to scan the area with ground-penetrating radar. The results were inconclusive. Soil disruption was noted, but it could have come from old utility lines or construction. Nothing further was found. Yet something continued to gnaw at Derek Malloy. He interviewed nearly 30 Thorntown residents, many of whom had never publicly spoken about the case. One elderly man, who had worked as a janitor at the nearby elementary school in the 1980s, recalled seeing a blue pickup truck circling the area for several days before the birthday party. Same time every day, mid-afternoon. Didn't think anything of it until later. The man never reported it. When Malloy asked why, the janitor simply replied, "In small towns, you don't talk about people unless you know for sure." Shannon Sherrill never remarried, never moved, never stopped hoping. Every birthday, she still lit a candle. Every October, she still walked the old neighborhood, even long after many neighbors had moved or passed away. After the false claim in 2003 and the surfacing of Craig's name, Marion stopped speaking to reporters. She refused interviews and never watched the documentaries, but she did speak once, anonymously, through a letter read during a 2016 town memorial service. "If she is out there, I hope she is safe. If she is gone, I hope it was quick. What I fear most is that she cried for me, and I wasn't there." No one who heard those words left with dry eyes. By 2020, the case had gone officially cold for over 3 decades. The FBI released a statement reaffirming their commitment to reviewing old leads, but no active search was being conducted. All the while, Shannon's name remained on the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. Then, in 2022, a curious development. A tip was phoned in from an anonymous caller claiming to have information about what happened to Shannon. They gave no name, just said, "Look behind the development on Miller Road. You'll know it when you see it." Police followed up. They searched the brush along Miller Road, behind the row of new homes. There was nothing there, no signs, no evidence, just another dead end. But the timing was odd, because Miller Road was the same street Craig Delaney had once rented a trailer from in 1985. In 2023, one final item was discovered. While digitizing the county's land records from the 1980s, a local archivist stumbled upon a permit filed by Craig Delaney in September 1986, 1 month before Shannon disappeared. It was a request to dig and pour a concrete slab behind the old shed on the vacant lot. The slab was approved, but there was no record it was ever removed, even when the property changed hands. And today, that exact space lies beneath a tool shed at the rear of a suburban backyard. No one knows what might lie underneath it. No one has asked the new owners to investigate, and Shannon Sherrill remains missing. Still 6 years old in the photographs. Still a birthday party with no ending. Subscribe to No Clue Crime, because some stories refuse to be forgotten.